Okay, it's November 25th, 1990. We're in West Bloomfield, Michigan at 5597 Apple Ridge Trail, and I'm going to be doing an oral history of Bob Benyas today, my father. We're going to talk a little bit about growing up in Detroit and the Tigers and the Depression and the war years. So, Dad, you want to come over and I'll ask you some questions now? Close the door so I won't be disturbed.
Oh, that's going to be on there. You know that, don't you? It's on. Hi, Ed. What do you want to know?
What do you want to tell me about growing up in Detroit?
Well, my memories are that life was pretty good.
Didn't you grow up during the Depression?
Yeah, but I don't think we knew we were that bad off. My father didn't work much, but somehow or other we never went hungry. We always had clothes. We rented a little house on Elmhurst that I remember.
What was the first house that you lived in?
Well, I think we had an apartment on Ridgeton, but I was very small. First house that I remember was on Elmhurst, 3010 Elmhurst, I remember. And I had a lot of boyfriends. We had a baseball team right from the houses that were around there. And we walked to school, walked to Roosevelt. And
Roosevelt Elementary School?
the Roosevelt Elementary School. And I think almost everybody was in the same situation, so we didn't really realize that we were poor or things were tough. I think, this was in the 20s, late 20s, which weren't that bad. It got bad, I think it was about 32.
When were you born?
I was born in 1923.
October 12th.
October 12th, 1923.
You were the first child?
I was the first child, and then I was more than 6. I was about 6. And Don was born in January. And then 6 years after that, I was 12 when Eddie was born.
What were your mom and dad doing besides making babies?
Well, my mother was a housewife when we were small. Dad was in the insurance business. Prior to that, he tells me stories about we sold pots and pans and cigars and pipes and things like that. But I think that was before he got married. I think once he came back to Detroit. I was born in Omaha. My dad had a job in Omaha. But then Grandpa said, "You get that kid back here." I was the first grandchild, so.
That's your mother's father?
My mother's father. I didn't really know my dad's parents. They lived in Petoskey, and my grandmother was killed in an automobile accident.
Before you were born?
Before I was born. My other grandma I knew very well. And she was also killed in an automobile accident very young. She was 54 when she was killed. But that was 1933, so I was 10.
Was that in Detroit?
She was actually killed in Washington, D.C. She and my grandpa and another couple were going to a funeral of all things of somebody they knew. I don't know who it was. And they were in Washington, D.C. and their car was in an accident. As a little kid, I wasn't told much. I don't even think I went to the funeral. I just knew I missed her. It was very close with my grandmother. They lived down the street. I was there every day after school. And my grandfather was nuts about me as a first grandchild. And, helped me play baseball more than my dad. Well, my dad was a good ball player, but he never really played baseball with me. But my grandfather did. Bought me a mitt. My grandfather bought me a mitt. My grandfather took me to the Tiger games.
What was he, Grandpa Weber?
Grandpa Weber, yeah. His name was Edward Weber. And he...
Was I named after him?
You were named after him. He had a store on Gratiot, downtown Detroit, and he sold used restaurant supplies. I guess when times were tough, there was a big market for this kind of thing. He did okay. I don't think he ever had a lot of money, but we lived okay. And but I worked a lot. I was a working kid since when I was very small.
When did you
Sold,
first start doing? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I sold magazines when I was like 10. Had a magazine route. You could, but people didn't subscribe to magazines. You bought magazines. Mainly, what I remember is Saturday Evening Post. I think Woman's Home Companion, and there were others I don't remember. And I had like a little route, sold magazines for a while. Then I think probably they bought them at newsstands or wherever they bought them. Then I sold newspapers. So I worked almost my entire life from the time I was about 10 years old, and I made good money. I had a nice job in the summer. When we moved to a street called Calvert, it was across the alley from a big school ground for where Roosevelt, Durfee, and Central was. And on Sunday, men played softball. And there could have been maybe 20 baseball games in that one field going on a Sunday morning in the summer. And I got pop wholesale. My grandfather gave me a wagon with a cooler. And I would buy ice and I'd sell pop. And I did okay on a weekend. I would make maybe $10, and that was people worked all week for $10, and I'd make that in a few hours, selling pop. And I had a good little business going. And I sold newspapers. And
how old were you about this time? About 12?
I must have been older. I must have been 13, 14, maybe 15. Because I went to Roosevelt and Durfee, and then when I was in the 10th grade at Central, I was probably 15, my family moved to Pingree. And I wasn't allowed to continue going to that school. I was half a block out of the district. And interestingly enough, it was on the same street that your mother lived on, but I didn't know her then. She was 4 years younger, and she lived 2 blocks away, but the same street, Pingree. But I didn't know her. She went to Central for some reason. She was allowed to go to Central. I was told I had to go to Northwestern. I graduated from Northwestern High School. I didn't know anybody, so it was kind of a strange thing. But in high school, I worked in a shirt store, sold shirts and ties, United Shirt. The school was on Grand Boulevard, and the store was on Grand Boulevard. I had to take a bus, which probably cost a nickel. And I was also, I'm trying to think when this was, probably in the summer when I was quite young. I was a runner for optometry stores. I had an Uncle Boris who was an optometrist, sold glasses downtown. And what they did was there would be a lab that would make the lenses, and they had messengers that would pick up the orders and take them to the lab, and when the glasses were ready, they would take them back. And this was in the Depression. And yeah, this was like the middle Depression. This was before high school, I think. I'm trying to think. High school, I know I worked in the United Shirt, so this is before high school. Worked a couple summers. And I think the buses and the streetcars were like 6 cents. And you would be given an allowance to use these buses to go to the things. And if you ran, you could save the 6 cents. It's hard to believe. And you could pick up maybe $1 or $2 a week by not taking the buses or hitching a ride or having a bike. And I always had pocket money because I would save the money, and I worked. And
you actually ran the glasses?
Yeah, I'd pick them up. It was all downtown. But some were a little ways out, like let's say 10 blocks out or something like that, up Woodward, where you'd have to take a streetcar. The lab was right downtown. I think in the Metropolitan Building, if I remember the name of the building. I think that building is now closed.
This is for Uncle Morris?
Uncle Morris got me the job.
Grandpa Saul's older brother?
Yeah, right. And the lab, I remember, the name was Schulte and Fox. 2 men, they had this lab. They probably had 10 or 15 guys working for them making glasses. And there's still such places now, but I think most of the opticians make glasses. Optometrists have a lab in their own place. Like the DOC, they have their own lab. Have their own lab man. But there's probably still those labs going on.
So you were playing a lot of baseball as a kid?
Yeah, I played a lot of baseball. Loved baseball. Baseball was my whole life.
What did you
More
play?
than school. I played catcher because Mickey Cochran was my hero. I wasn't real good because my eyes were going bad and I didn't know it. I didn't wear glasses. I didn't really know why. I was okay, but I wasn't a good hitter or anything like that. And mainly it was had to do with my eyes. And although I had these uncles who were optometrists, nobody thought to check me.
When did you get your first pair of glasses?
Probably after my bar mitzvah, 14 or 15, like that. And I had an eye that turned in, it still turns in, and they tried to correct it by giving me bifocals, which was a disaster. It used to make me nauseous, and I'd fall downstairs because I couldn't see out of them. It was really a bad diagnosis. And in those days, nobody...
We put this on pause.
The red button.
Yeah. The red button's record.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, whenever he gets over here. Okay, bye.
Just start it again?
Why did you hit pause? You should see a little red light in the viewfinder if it's on. Look in the viewfinder. Am I in there? There should be a little red light.
Yeah, the red light's on. I hit the pause and it didn't do anything.
Probably just ran.
Okay, and the counter's going.
Yeah, so it's probably still recording.
Okay. Is the sound okay, do you think?
I don't know. We'll have to... I don't know how you check it. We'll play it through the TV later.
Okay. So, tell me, by the way, that one story, just out of sequence of Uncle Aaron checking your eyes.
Oh, well, that was much later. Well,
I know it's later, but that's a great story.
Well, my dad, there were 9 children in my father's family, and Morris was the oldest and was an optometrist. And I guess he always made a good living. He never had any children. So he got his other brothers involved in this, his younger brothers. I think he even tried to get my dad involved, but my dad, didn't want to go to school, or it was whatever it was. But Uncle Aaron, who was younger, and then Uncle Mort, and then I have another uncle who married my dad's sister. My dad had a sister, Pearl, and she married a man by the name of Murray Jackman. He was an optometrist. He was my uncle. So I really had 4 uncles who were optometrists. But this was after the war. When I came back, Uncle Aaron had a shop, and he also had Parkinson's. It was the beginning of Parkinson's, and he wanted me to try contacts. So he tried to put the contact in with his finger that would shake. I went nuts. So I never got contacts. To this day, I don't like contacts.
Well, let's go back to...
Yeah.
Tell me, Mickey Cochran was your hero. Do you remember the 1934 pennant?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was big news, and well, sports was the life. We didn't really have money for a lot of things, so we went to movies. Movies were like a dime, but sports. Joe Louis was a world champion. He was from Detroit. That was really important. And of course, when Hank Greenberg played for the Tigers and being Jewish, that was all anybody talked about. You didn't talk about business. There was no business. It was between the wars. The wars were not... They were starting in Europe, but they weren't that important. You didn't really read about that. I liked photography from a very early age, and Life magazine was my Bible. I couldn't wait for Life magazine to come. And Life magazine talked a lot about, in those days, the problem that farmers had. All the farms were destitute. The ground wasn't even good for growing for some reason. They had the Dust Bowl. They weren't fertile. They did not apparently know how to use fertilizer or how to rotate crops. All these things came along, I think, later. And Life magazine was involved in how a lot of people lived, but we weren't that concerned about international affairs, what was happening in the world. Of course, there was no Israel. There was Palestine, which was like some other place. We just heard about it. We gave money. We had what was called a pushka, a little tin box, and you put your pennies in there. And every child was taught to do that, to save money for poor people. But it didn't mean much to us. We didn't really know what is a poor person. it was great to live in Detroit. It was a very friendly city. You took buses or streetcars everywhere. You didn't lock your door at night. There was no danger. Nobody was afraid of strangers. Um, you knew about black people, but they were nothing to be afraid of. They worked. There were a lot of maids that were black. There were even white people that were maids. And they were, and my parents always taught me to have a lot of respect. I could never talk down to anybody or put down anybody. So a maid was like a member of the family. Um, and even in the poor times, we seemed to have a maid. My mother somehow or other always found the money for a maid. I don't know what they paid those people. Not very much, I'm sure. We had help. Um,
So, how did you get started in photography?
Was that started in high school? I met another student who had a dark room and was involved in photography. And his name is Irving Stolman. We're still friends. We see each other. Still friends. And he showed me how to develop.
Okay. Well, today is April 2nd, 1991. We're in West Bloomfield. Bob and Eddie are talking. I think we left off last time, which was a few months ago, we were talking about your start in photography. You said you first got your start with a fellow named Irving Stolberg.
Stolman.
Tell me about that.
Stolman. Well, I think I was about 15, and we met in high school, and he had a darkroom in the basement. I don't remember how it came about, but he wanted me to see how he made pictures, and I thought that was complete magic. Put a piece of plain paper, expose it to a light, then put it in some water, and out comes a picture, and that was it for me. I've been a photographer ever since, and that's a long time ago.
What did you do in high school as far as practicing your photography?
I didn't do anything officially in the school, but I took a lot of pictures around the house. I was working at the time at United Shirt, I'm pretty sure, because I know I started there very young. And whatever money I made, I bought little packs of photographic paper and a little chemistry, and I made a little dark room.
Had a dark room in your house?
Had a little dark room in the house on Pingree. I bought an enlarger. I don't remember what I paid for it. Probably was used. Got it from somebody. Pretty much self-taught.
What kind of camera did you have?
Well, I don't really remember, but it was a fairly good camera. I don't remember where I got it, whether somebody gave it to me or I bought it. I don't really remember. By the time I got to Wayne, I was a pretty good photographer because I worked on the Collegian, which was the school newspaper, and I had a magazine called Panorama. I did some photography for that. Of course, I was only at Wayne a short time, and then I was drafted.
When did you start Wayne? You were about 18, 19?
Yeah, it must have been about 19.
What was that, 1942?
Yeah, right. And I was drafted in 43.
Mm-hmm.
Fall of 42, drafted in spring of 43.
Just tell me a little bit more about what high school did you go to?
Well, I started at Central. There was intermediate, there was elementary, intermediate, and high school in one complex where like every Jewish kid in the world went in the Detroit area, Roosevelt, Durfee, and Central. And I went to Roosevelt, Durfee, and Central. Then that's when the family moved to Pingree. And instead of getting permission to finish off, the family said that they wouldn't give me permission, and then they tried to lie about it, saying that I was living with an aunt who was living closer to the school, and they checked up and they found out I wasn't living there, and they made me leave the school, which was very upsetting at the time. They probably lost half a semester. I really got upset. I went to Northwestern where I didn't know anybody. It was a nice high school, and later on, I made some friends there. But at the time, really took me out of my element. It was not. I would never do that to any kid, unless there's you have to, if they're moving or something like that.
So you finished up at Northwestern?
Finished up, graduated Northwestern. Was accepted to Wayne, luckily, because my marks weren't that good, and started in Wayne. But and was more interested in photography than anything else. But there wasn't any photographic school.
Mm-hmm.
If there had been a photographic school and I would have gone to it, I probably would have been ahead, rather than just going to Wayne. But I had some good teachers, and I guess I learned about a love of literature and science.
What did you did you participate in any of the sports programs at Wayne?
Well, I ran track, went out for track. It was very easy to run for sports because most of the guys were drafted. So if you could breathe, you could be on just about any team you wanted to.
But you were pretty fast.
I was pretty good, yeah. I had a good coach, Coach Holmes, and he helped me. And was freshman, it wasn't any meets or anything. It was just like inter-squad stuff. But I won a couple races.
And you told me once a story how you were pretty fast on the track team and football coach game.
Yeah, right. They wanted me to go out for football. Played one game, got hurt, tore the cartilage in my knee. Yeah, I never played football. Didn't really understand about football.
Well,
I loved baseball. I didn't know anything about football.
What was the story of that one play?
I took the ball, was supposed to run, and a guy tackled me from the side, and my leg was going at a right angle. They snapped it back in place. That was the end of my career. No.
Do you remember when war broke out, when Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I definitely remember. That's something very clear. On Sunday, we listened to the radio. There were like special programs, and that's what families did. They got around the radio and they listened. I don't remember if it was the Ford Sunday Evening Hour, which was a classical music program. It probably was. Or there was also a thing called the Firestone Hour. And then the news came that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. Probably affected my parents more than it did me, because I didn't really comprehend. I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. Never heard of it. I don't know if I heard of Hawaii. Probably heard of it, but it didn't mean anything. It was so far away. My brother and sister were very small. Although Don was 12, I guess. 12 or 13. Eddie was younger yet. So my parents were upset. I had to register for the draft.
You were still in high school?
No, I was at Wayne.
No, in 40.
Wait, 41. No, 41. You're right. No, you're going back. 41. No, I was in high school, and then I had to register for the draft. Got a draft number, and some of the guys like Dave Dombey were able to finish their college education while they were in the Army. They sent them to schools. I wasn't that lucky. But I did go to a photography school in the Army, which was good for me, I guess.
Well, you went in when you were about in 1943. Is when you
43. I think it was March.
Where did you go?
First, I went to Camp Custer in Michigan, Battle Creek. Then I was shipped to Texas, to Shepherd Field, Texas, which was near, I think it was Wichita Falls. Wichita Falls? No. In the northern part of Texas.
And that's where you did your basic training?
Basic training. I think that was 8 weeks. That was tough. It was tough. It was real hot. It was now summer. It was very dry, desert. It was pretty rugged, but as a kid, I was in good shape from running track, so I could handle it okay. And then I got sent to photography school.
What? How did that happen?
Well, that had to do with the man I became friendly with, Jim Alta, who was, I was one of the youngest to be drafted. He was one of the oldest. And his name alphabetically was right above mine, Jim Alta, then Bob Benyas. And we got put in the same barracks, so we sort of became friends, although we didn't know each other. And he was quite a bit older than I am.
Where was he from?
He was from Detroit, lived in Detroit, was married. He was just under 35, and if he'd been 35, he would have been drafted. He was like 34 and a half or something like that. And after basic training, near the end of basic training, you took an aptitude test to see where you were to be sent. And both of us were supposed to be sent to airplane mechanics school. We qualified for that because we had mechanical ability. Well, Jim didn't want to do that because he had been a photographer at Detroit Edison for about 12 years. Went to the commanding officer, said, I'd really like to go to photo school as a photographer. He was now past 35, and the commanding officer agreed with him and said, yeah, it's kind of dumb to make you an airplane mechanic, and we'll send you to photo school. And he said, well, send my buddy too, because he's the same as me. So he said, okay, yeah, Bob can go too. So, because actually the quota at that time was closed. They had a lot of photographers. This would be what, the fall of '43.
And photo school was where? Out Colorado?
Yeah, it was in Colorado, Lowry Field. It was beautiful. After leaving the desert, this was gorgeous. Colorado was wonderful. It was mile high. It was clear air. Beautiful campus where this was. Really good facilities. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of technical things which I didn't know. Had no way of even knowing they even existed. Knew nothing of different films or chemistry or what's involved in photography, and I was able to learn all that and absorb all that. And we both graduated and were sent to different bases. I forget where Jim went. I went to Virginia. I went to what the hell is the name of that field? Can't think of the name of it.
Newport News?
No, that's where I shipped out of. No, I was almost a year. I was at a base in Virginia.
Well, before we get to that, I want to ask you about basic training. And you told me a story a long time ago about your basic training experience and how you about it having to do with a bayonet.
Famous bayonet story, huh? Well, the first part of basic training is physical training, marches and jumping jacks and a lot of exercise. And then they get into Army stuff. They teach you about a rifle. I knew nothing of a rifle. I'd never seen a rifle. So I learned a little bit about a rifle. Went to rifle range, fired a rifle. That was kind of interesting, but it hurt my shoulder. Matter of fact, I think I got a marksman medal. I had this one-eye vision, photographer's vision, so I was able to see the target pretty good. And I did get a marksman medal, and was able to fire the rifle. It was kind of fun. And then one day they said we're going to have bayonet training. Well, I didn't know what bayonet training was, so they showed us this knife that you stick on the rifle, and then they got a bag made out of straw, and they got a figure drawn on there. They didn't have Hitler, but it was like Hitler. I didn't know who Hitler was. Although I heard the name, I knew he was a bad man. He was head of Germany. And all the guys would run up there and they'd stick that knife in the straw bag. Well, I wouldn't do that because I figured I don't have to learn that because I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go stick a knife in anybody. I'm not mad at anybody. And I just said I wasn't going to do it. And the sergeant got a little upset, demanded I do it. And the more he got mad, the madder I got. He said, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I was sent to my barracks. and somebody got a hold of the chaplain. The chaplain came to talk to me. And I guess I didn't really understand the consequences of disobeying an order, although I'd been trained, I'd been told you can't disobey a direct order, particularly from an officer or a non-com. And they said they could put me in jail, they could even shoot me if they wanted to. Wartime, you're disobeying an order. But I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to do that. And the rabbi that came told me that I had to do it, that he understood. He was very nice. And he said, there's 99% chances of photographer, you're not going to do this. You're going to carry a camera, but in training you have to do it. He said, if you don't do it, your parents are going to be informed that you're in the stockade. You can be tried. They can shoot you. It's not worth it. He said, you should do this. So he was a rabbi, somebody I respected. He was older. He was probably 25 years old, but he looked older than me, and I decided I would do that. And I don't know if he talked to the sergeant or not, but the sergeant was very nice, and he took me alone, without the guys, and put the bayonet on for me, and held my hand and pushed it into the bag. So I didn't really do it, but I did it. And he checked me off as having passed that. So he helped me. But
it was important for him that you did it too.
Yeah, it was important to him too, right. But at that time, I still wasn't mad at anybody. The Army was like going to camp. It was kind of fun. I had no training in hate or why you should kill somebody or.
What was it like being a Jewish person?
Well, there was some anti-Semitism. Mostly it had to do with the fact that on Saturday you were supposed to clean the barracks. That was a day in basic. This is only in basic training. That everybody had to clean the barracks. Well, Saturday was the Sabbath, and although I was not a very religious Jew and didn't go to the synagogue that much, I didn't feel I should be cleaning a barracks on Saturday. That was another problem. And I got called a lot of names, and they thought I was doing it because I was shirking my duty, that I didn't want to clean beneath me, or there was some shit. But it only came from a few guys. Most of the guys just didn't pay any attention, and I think that's what happens in life. I think there's a few prejudiced people that pick on other people, and the majority of people just don't get involved. They don't want to be involved, and that may be wrong, but that's the way it is. Anyway, I got around that again with the rabbi's help by taking any time off that I had during the week to clean whatever I had to clean. I did windows, I did floors, I forget, the latrines. We took turns at different things, but I didn't do it on Saturday. And I went to services. Saturday I went to services. It was a little bit of a problem. I think it was hard to run a war, And of course on Sunday they had church services, but it was in the morning and it was over, and then everybody kind of took it easy on Sunday. They didn't on Saturday. I would say it was a slight problem, but it wasn't a serious problem. I never got into any fights.
Now tell me about once you were shipped out to Virginia after you finished photography school.
Well, I worked in a photo lab there for some time. I really forget. That was sort of uneventful. Wasn't that important. I was able to go home. Had a furlough to go home after training. Then I went home again before I was shipped overseas.
When were you shipped overseas?
Well, I must have left on around June 1st of 1944, because June 6th was D-Day. And my parents knew that I was leaving from the west coast, the east coast of the United States. They had no idea, neither did I have any idea that I'm going to India. I'm going the other way. I'm going through the Panama Canal. But they must have been very concerned. Although in their letters, they wrote me every day, and I got this big stack of letters like 3 months later when I got to India. Never said anything about being concerned or I hope I'm okay. Well, they said that I hope I'm okay. Too bad I don't have those letters. They were burned up in a fire in my parents' garage. My mother. I kept my letters, brought them home, and my mother certainly kept all my letters. And I wrote every day about my experiences on the boat, which were not that eventful.
Did you know what you didn't know where you were going?
Didn't know where I was going to land in Australia. Never was told the word. Had no idea. It was crazy. I kept wondering, where the hell could you go? Where do you go for 2 months? A lone ship. We were a lone ship. And every day they'd have gunnery practice, too. And you didn't know if you were being attacked or it was practice. There were all kind of rumors. They really didn't inform you of anything. And I was going a little nuts because I was like 5 holds down, packed in. There was 5,000 guys on this one cruise ship, which probably would hold, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people tops on a cruise.
So it was a civilian ship that
They modified. They just emptied out the lower rooms and put in bunk beds, and you had all your gear. Plus, you had to sleep on this bed. It was pretty rough, but as a young guy, it's an adventure. And then I got very tired of just hanging around. And you had 2 meals a day. You line up for a morning meal, and you could almost get in line again for the evening meal. It took that long to feed everybody. So I decided to volunteer for kitchen duty. And one of my friends, I think, was on kitchen duty. He said, "Hey, it's kind of neat. You just, you're up on the top. You get breaks. You get all the food you want. We ate steaks practically every day, and I peeled potatoes, which they had a big potato peeling machine, which was like a blender. The inside of it was very rough, like rough sandpaper, and I threw the potatoes in there, and then water came in, and you spun them around, and the rough part knocked the skin off the potatoes, and you take the potatoes out. And that's what I did in the morning. I did it in the afternoon. And I was able to come on deck. I got a little sunshine. It's kind of pleasant out in the Pacific.
Didn't you have a little incident on deck with a bird?
No. That came later in India. We'll get to India about the birds. That was in. No, there was no birds way out there in the Pacific. Anyway, we landed in Australia. I still didn't know, where the hell's Australia? Who heard of Australia? We didn't stop in Sydney. We went to the other side of Australia, which is Perth. And the boat docked, and we were able to get off for 1 day. I had a great time. Went into town. There were people there. They were really friendly. Just did town stuff. Just walked around the street. Bunch of soldiers and sailors. Then we got back on the ship. We were there about a week while they reloaded water and food. Took off again. We were gone for a couple of weeks. Landed in Bombay, India. I didn't really make any friends any close friends on this trip. But when I got to India, I was assigned to a photo school where they taught the pilots to fire cameras that were hooked up to the machine guns. They were called a GASP camera, gun sight aiming point camera. So we were taught how to repair the cameras, although there were certain guys that did the repairs. I didn't really do that. How to install them. They were installed in the wings. They were hooked up electronically to the machine guns. So like every 5th bullet, which was a tracer bullet, a bullet that glowed, you could actually see where it was going in the sky, would fire the camera. So the little movie would be made of every time the pilot fired, and you would see if you hit something or not. You could also use it in training because it would photograph a target. They would, instead of firing the actual machine gun, at the beginning of the training, they'd fire the machine gun, but there were no bullets, but the camera would work and they could see if they hit a target. So then we had to, there was a magazine holding the film. We had to take that in the darkroom, develop it in a 16 millimeter movie film in a processor. Did that, mixed the chemicals, and showed the film usually in the evening to the pilots, and they would discuss it. So you were a projectionist.
What kind of pilots were in Bombay? American.
Well,
British?
this was I missed a step. Actually, this wasn't in Bombay. This was in Karachi. I was only in Bombay about a week, and that was just a place where they put us. It was an old British barracks, which was pretty bad, pretty awful. But then we shipped out, and we went by train to this place in the desert called Karachi, and that's when I had the experience with the bird. We were gone. I think it was 5 days on this train. So to feed you, they'd stop the train. The chefs would get off the train with big kettles, and they'd cook something. You could walk around. You could relieve yourself. In the desert, there's nobody around. And then you'd have your mess kit that they'd give you some beans or mashed potatoes or canned goods, like Spam or what were called sea rations, stuff like that. And one day I was sitting there eating this, and a vulture came and took the food right off my plate. And the vulture has a wingspan of a good 8 to 12 feet. And the wing hit me in the face, knocked me over, scared the living shit out of me. I mean, I don't think I'd ever been that scared. I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm on the ground with this, thing came out of nowhere on my face. My food's gone. Guys are all laughed. They all thought this was really funny. That took me a long time to get over. Everything in India was very primitive.
Mm-hmm.
Trains were pre-World War I trains. You slept on a seat. There was
And at that time the British were in control of India.
Well, the British were in control of India, and from what we saw, they really didn't do anything at all to help the Indian people. It was a land of great contrast, very, very poor, beggars all over, clothed, sometimes naked, sometimes just with a rag around them, bathing in the street on sewer water, terrible. And then rich, very wealthy people in fancy cars or even horse-drawn wagons. Shopkeepers, there were a lot of middle class. There were shopkeepers. Got to Karachi. Once we got to Karachi, we were pretty much just by ourselves in the desert. We did our job. I was there almost, could have been about a year. I didn't really keep track. I forget.
And your function there was to process the film from.
Yeah, I did a little bit of everything. I did a little
PSA
PR
piece.
photography too. I had a camera. I was able to take some pictures in the general area. Some planes were damaged. I did some damage photography to the planes. A couple guys got medals, and I was called to take a picture of these guys being awarded medals. And then after a while, they closed that school. And I was sent to Bengal Air Depot, which was outside of Calcutta.
Although before that, there was one story that you told me about. Was it a captain or something that you had a problem with in Karachi?
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, he was a young guy who became a lieutenant, called a 90-day wonder. Really was not officer material. Nobody liked him. Gave everybody a bad time. He was also he was definitely either anti-Semitic or anti-Bob Benyas, whatever it was. We didn't get along, and they treated me very, very poorly. He treated everybody very poorly, and at one time there were about I forget, there were maybe 20 guys in our little group there. and we decided that everybody would apply for a transfer. We'd go to the adjutant general, which is like the lawyer on the base, representing the soldiers, and we'd all apply for a transfer. And they want to know how come everybody's applying for a transfer. Get me out of there. And we all said we couldn't. I think his name was Willie. We called him Lieutenant Willie. I can't think of his last name. Well, what happened was, in a very short time, he was transferred out of there, which was what we wanted. And he was gone. The next guy came in. He was okay. But we heard that they promoted him to captain and put him in charge of all the photography in the CBI, China, Burma, India. So, but we got rid of him anyway.
Now, a lot of people ask me, what were you doing in India during the war? I mean, what was happening in India? And you mentioned the China, Burma, India theater.
Well, okay. Number one, we were not informed about anything. I think the general communication amongst the troops was very poor. I mean, we were young kids. We were sent there, and the first thing they teach you is don't volunteer and don't ask questions. I mean, you were not allowed to ask a question, and there was no kind of training about why we were fighting, what we were fighting for. I mean, we knew Pearl Harbor was bombed and it killed our guys. We knew very little about Europe. I knew very little about Hitler. I knew a little bit about World War I because my dad was in World War I, and he told me a little bit about it. Probably in high school, we probably studied a little bit about how Czechoslovakia came about and these other countries. I remember some of that. Really knew very little. Didn't ask. Now the only thing that I can assume was that there was a war. There was a war in Africa. A heavy war in Africa with Rommel, Montgomery. And also the Japanese were in Burma, and India was in between, with the Middle East. Middle East was in there too. Of course, between North Africa and where we were. Most of this I looked up later, and the only thing I can assume was that it was an easy, sort of a central place to have training. Guys could have gone anywhere. They could have gone, into Europe. They could have gone into Africa. They could have gone into Burma, which they did. A lot of the guys fought in Burma.
That's where they were fighting the Japanese?
They were fighting the Japanese in Burma.
Did you work with now, India was a British colony. Were you working with British troops at all, or was you just American?
We worked only with Americans. Sort of, we took over from the British. That was, the Gandhi period was then too. That's when Gandhi was becoming very strong. We learned a little bit about Gandhi. There were not even any American newspapers that I remember reading. Didn't get magazines.
You had, didn't you have Indians natives who would do things?
Well, they worked very
$1 a
cheaply.
day
$1 a month. $1 a month. $2 a month was a big job. Yeah, I had an individual bearer. Took care of everything I needed. When I went to shower, he'd carry the towel, hand it to me. Polish my shoes. Shoes had to be polished every day because there was a lot of mildew, so you had to take care of leather goods. Make my bed, such as it was, had to be, and he just did whatever I asked. Just a personal servant for I forget, $2 a month, and I was probably making, I think I made about $90 a month then, of which I bought a bond a month, which went home. $18.75 was taken out of my pay to buy a war bond. Those all went to my mother to keep for me.
Why did you buy war bonds?
Well, I knew. Well, there was a lot of publicity about war bonds, paying for the war by buying war bonds, and it was a way to save money. The banks paid very little. The banks paid, I don't know if they paid 2 or 3% on your money. It isn't that long ago, but times were so different than they are today, where everybody is informed about so many things.
Let's just take a little break for a second.
Okay.